Welcome to episode 102 of the Clive Barker podcast. I didn't do the Amiga robot voice. If you really want that back in, just let us know and we'll bring it back again. But this one, episode 102, is about Frankenstein In Love, the play, the 1982 play by Clive Barker. And you can find that in Incarnations, the 1995 book. So anyway, it took us 3 weeks to get this episode out, and we did have a glitch. The glitch basically ate up a half an hour of our podcast, which was really disappointing. It took us a little while we finally decided, okay, we're going to go back and re-record that part of it. So it's not like it was scripted. It's a little bit different than it would have been, but I think it's actually came out better. So here we go, episode 102. Okay. Well, hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good.
It's going well. We're really excited about this episode.
It was really fun to go back and read this again because I haven't read it since Incarnations came out in 1995.
Right. From Harper.
This was my first time reading it, so.
Oh, wow.
It was a pleasure, or just great.
It was amazing to me, and of course, we're talking about Frankenstein In Love, the 1982 Clive Barker play that was performed by the Dog Company Theater, and you can get it in one of his one of Clive Barker's two volumes of plays. So this one is Incarnations.
Exactly, and here's a funny bit of trivia that I've discovered doing my work for this, my research, is that this book originally was going to be called The Incarnation, because in an America Online appearance from Clive Barker in 18 August 1997, he said, "In the last 2 years, I've published through Harper Prism 2 collections of my plays. One is called The Incarnation, and the other called Forms of Heaven." So I don't know if it was Clive mispronouncing the name of his own book, or if it was supposed to be called The Incarnation, but apparently that was recorded in that AOL online appearance.
My guess would be that he just said the name wrong.
Probably.
Yeah.
But that's cool. And this one, I got autographed, and then Forms of Heaven, for some reason, because I had a big pile of books in 1995, like a huge duffel bag full of books for him to sign. And I think that one got pushed through without actually getting autographed.
Oh, okay.
But this one I have autographed. So the cast on this one isn't huge like it is on History of the Devil. This is probably his other most famous play, I think, next to History of the Devil.
Sure. At least from the 2 volumes. Because the most successful one was Secret Life of Cartoons.
But yeah, smaller cast. And I think, Rob, you were saying that, or maybe Jose, you were saying that Doug Bradley played 3 parts.
He played Frankenstein, the Dr. Frankenstein, the Cardinal, and he played
President. No. Yes, he did. He played the President Garcia Eliodoro Perez. So he played the President, Dr. Frankenstein, and the Cardinal Armitano.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't see that President and El Coco in the same scene.
Yeah. And Maria Reina Duran, the dead fan dancer, was played by Lynn Darnell.
Oh, wow.
Another member of the Dog Company, which I believe she was Doug Bradley's wife for a long time, right? I think that was this Lynn.
I think so, yeah.
And also Oliver Parker of Nightbreed and
Coco.
Moving Man and Hellraiser, he played El Coco.
there was a cool picture of him from the what's that magazine, Cinema Fest. It's called. They did a big coverage of Clive Barker and when Candyman 2 was coming out, Hellraiser 4, Lord of Illusions back in '95.
Okay, yeah.
They also covered some stuff on the Dog Company, and there was a picture of Oliver Parker with I think, what would you say her name was? Doug Bradley's wife,
Lynn
Darnell. Yeah.
And it was like a nice black and white picture.
I know the picture you're talking about. It's also on the book Shadows in Eden, I think.
Ah, okay.
Is it a picture where he's just standing behind her and you can see his forehead is like all stitched up and he's got makeup on? Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. I'll try to find it or take a picture of it from the book and add it to the show notes.
Do we know who played Veronique Flecker?
No, not sure.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that she appears with Maria, so it couldn't have been Lynn.
No.
But yeah, that'd be interesting to find out. The thing that caught a couple of things. I guess the first one that caught my attention on this is it's kind of reminded me a lot of Maximilian Bacchus and Tortured Souls, because the time period that this is in, it feels a little slippery. You know, there are cars and but also there's a plague of cholera. Well,
to me, it seems grounded in the 80s decade of the Cold War, because there's a Russian ambassador, there's the American ambassador, there's machine guns, it takes place in the Banana Republic. So it's more like a revolutionary thing. I wouldn't be surprised if in Central America there would be like an outbreak of cholera in a war-torn, republic. Okay. So the fact that there's a Russian ambassador and an American ambassador, and one of them even calls Henry, which I'm assuming is Henry Kissinger, it seems to me to crystallize this more personally in the Cold War time.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. The other thing that caught my attention is how many seeds there are of the Books of Blood in this play. And most of my notes were quotes of things that or ideas that popped up in Books of Blood stories later on. So the first one, most obvious one, is the title, right? It's Frankenstein in Love, but it's also called Or the Life of Death.
Yeah. The Life of Death became a story in the Books of Blood, in a particularly gory story as well, where a woman goes into this chapel and she goes into the crypt and she discovers that there was an excavation going on of all these bodies that died of a plague under the church. And, unwittingly she becomes the carrier of the disease.
And there's this play has a lot of really gory stuff and just really disturbing stuff, even just in the dialogue. Like
I know it really.
What was that? One of those two freaks. One of them's name was it Pazzo?
Maltos, and
Felizzo, I think.
Folizou,
yeah.
Folizou and Maltos.
Yeah, and Folizzo was describing at one point where he was trying to relieve the pressure in his brain, so he drilled a hole and put a hose up into his head and was trying to suck it out, and he accidentally sucked out a part of his brain.
That was Lazaro. Yeah, that was Lazaro, or Lazaro. Yeah. I'm assuming the name is supposed to be kind of Spanish, so it would be Lazaro.
Oh, okay.
That there was a connection there probably between Lazaro and Lazarus. So
that's what I was thinking about, that name having to do with that. Yeah. Lazarus is from the Bible, is it not?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So another connection to the Books of Blood I found was El Coco saying, "How can I cut off my own hands? The dice player would know, wouldn't he? And he'd lose his temper. I can't plot against my own body." And of course, this is, hailing to the body politic and the body parts revolting against their maker. And I think Clive Barker had even talked about that in an interview at one point, about how he was fascinated by the idea of the body, the body politic and all the different parts of the body making the whole, and what if those parts all rebel against the whole. And that's what the short story was about, and that's kind of what was going on with this with El Coco and this Frankenstein's monster.
Oh, that's a good catch there, yeah.
And Veronique says, "Perhaps we're too cautious, just making love to men. Maybe there's more pleasure in bricks or trees or fire. Nothing's enough, nothing satisfies. I'm hungry, never full. Do you understand?" So, of course, that's Age of Desire. That was that to me is a seed that he had planted that later he sort of explored with that short story.
Very cool. Yeah. Also, I have this idea. El Coco, the anti-hero of this play, he walks on fire, and he walks on coals, and he claims to bathe in fire.
Mm-hmm.
This is called Frankenstein in Love. Frankenstein's novel was originally subtitled Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus.
Yeah.
Prometheus brought fire to man and got punished for it.
Yeah.
And also, Frankenstein died in the fire at the end of the novel. He immolates himself in the Arctic.
Yeah.
But here, El Coco walks on the fire and it doesn't hurt him. There's this connection between Prometheus, Frankenstein, and El Coco. I think it's very interesting that he subverts the whole Frankenstein idea. Instead of dying in the fire, he walks on fire. Fire doesn't hurt him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also a resurrected creature that does this sort of sideshow carnival trick, which is like, to me, reminded me of the Razor Eater from the Damnation game, because he was a resurrected creature that ate razors.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I liked how Barker kind of flipped the story around where, like, Dr. Frankenstein he was the one that felt betrayed by his creation instead of the, creation.
Oh, yeah.
It was the one in the original story felt he was the one that was betrayed.
Yeah.
Right. The monster feels rejected by its creator.
He describes Frankenstein as a monster in the cast notes. He puts a monster. So maybe he was saying that he was the monster this time.
Absolutely.
Somehow he was misunderstood.
There's also a part in this play where El Coco wants Bozufi to murder people to help him find a new skin after he was skinned. So, which obviously that we know where that comes back, in the Hellbound Heart and Hellraiser.
A lot of Hellraiser thing, a little like skin bodies, cannibalism, desires.
Yeah.
Also going back to what you were saying, Rob, about the monstrous, in the production notes, Clive Barker says that this play creates a kind of alternative world where everybody's corrupted or corrupt, dead or dying, monstrous in form, deed, or both. So it's like, in this case, El Coco is the monster in form, and Joseph Frankenstein is the monster in deeds.
Yeah.
In the whole play, I think all these characters are all beyond redemption to a point. I mean, even El Coco commits cannibalism.
Yeah.
Murders people, even though he didn't really mean to, but he does end up murdering people out of, random acts of violence. All these characters are beyond redemption.
And he talks Bozufi into kill the tailor into killing people just to make a nice skin for himself.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were in a place that was full of dead people that they could have just taken their skin.
Yeah, but he wanted something fresh and nice.
Yeah.
Look like a gentleman.
Just as a quick synopsis of the play for people who haven't read this book or the play, this is that Banana Republic. It's in the throes of a coup. The dictator is trapped in a hospital or in an operating room at the beginning. And there's a revolutionary called Cockatoo. There's the leader of the rebellion, which is El Coco. Unbeknownst to most of the revolutionaries, he's actually a creation of Dr. Frankenstein, who hails to a Dr. Mengele kind of character, like from the Nazis.
And they even call him the Angel of Auschwitz for a while. Then later he says, that's not me. I'm Jewish. I was in Auschwitz, not by choice.
Yeah, but then he has a ring that, is a ring from Auschwitz that he had. It kind of makes him appear like he was in Auschwitz, but if he had a ring there, probably he was not in a concentration camp. Probably he was one of the doctors that was experimenting on people.
Yeah,
I got that feeling.
It's not. Yeah, it's not super clear.
Right, exactly.
But it sure does seem that way.
That's a great thing about this story too, is that it brings up a lot of questions, but it never answers them. And I like stories like that.
I think that the two female characters are not beyond redemption. I think that Maria and Veronique are more sympathetic.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Even though Maria also plots to murder El Coco at some point.
Yeah, well, he did strangle her for no
That's
reason.
true.
Yeah.
Another seed that I found, and I'm not sure if I'm just making connections in my mind, but in the opening scene, Maria Reina Duran, the dead fan dancer, says, I know there are monsters out there tonight, roaming around, looking for love, and when they find it, endless night. It just reminded me of the tragic character of Christopher Carrion in Aberrat, and the way that the third volume is called Absolute Midnight. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, when you just said that, I was thinking you were going to say Nightbreed or Cabal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That too. I mean, there's also, between Veronique and El Coco, there's kind of a Laurie Boone kind of thing going on.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that was, I went back and looked at the Dark Fantastic, the little passages that they, talk about this play. And yeah, he even mentions that about what Laurie and Hal Boone, where she says, accept your bestial side,
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Clive Barker's always, carried on these themes, his stories like that.
I also have another moment here that I would like to bring up, which is a line from Joseph Frankenstein. He says, "When we're children, we think death's a kind of sleep, curable in a while. Gradually the truth dawns. Death is a permanent complaint. We look at our bodies and see them putrefying around our living minds, and we know, finally, that the enemy is our flesh. The body is a prison and must be escaped by metaphysics or changed by wit and knife and courage."
Yeah.
You compare that with what Dorothea says in Lord of Illusions. She quotes Swan as saying, "Flesh is a trap and magic sets us free." There's an echo of that line from Joseph Frankenstein in the line from Dorothea.
Wow, that's true. Another one that I found was the line from Frankenstein when the monster El Coco tries to attack Dr. Frankenstein, and he says, "Your flesh opens like a flower if it is laid on me in anger." Which is, how spoilers bleed. That's what happens to those people. That concept is explored a lot in that story of people's skin opening up, from a disease.
Yeah.
And
that is very good. Yeah.
You picked up on a lot of good job on that.
Well, it was it was like I don't know why I didn't notice any of that stuff when I read this story the first time. I was probably just in a hurry. I really wanted to read all of them, I think.
Sure.
First time around.
Being my first pass through, I don't think I really didn't pick up on that kind of stuff. The only thing I saw was the Hellbound Hard Nods, and I did pick up on the body politic, but that probably in my next one I'll, when I read it again, I'll keep those little nods from the Books of Blood in mind.
I would just like to take this opportunity to mention a little bit about this play, how it got developed, and how it was produced by the Dog Company. This play was written in 1981, and this play followed between, I think it was Paradise Street, and I think The Secret Life of Cartoons.
Oh.
This play wasn't directed by Clive Barker, though. When they actually produced it, it was directed by Malcolm Edwards. It was decided by the company, by the Dog Company, that they wanted to mix things up a little bit, and they didn't want people to think that Clive Barker was just the guy who handled everything in the company. And so they had it directed by Malcolm Edwards. According to the Dark Fantastic, he did a more conventional approach to the play, and they mention here that Clive Barker used to throw every ball in the air, and then if two members of the audience catch the ball, that would be okay with him. But in this case, Malcolm Edwards wanted just to throw one ball in the air and have the audience actually focus on that one ball and see it go up and down. So, and apparently it was really popular. This play opened in the Cockpit Theater from April 14 to May 1st, 1982. And it was so successful that they even got on to go to Belgium and Holland, where they did a production there as well. It was also the company's lead performance at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland, where it played for 3 weeks. It played from August 17 through September 4 of 1982 at the St. Patrick's Primary School. I really hope they washed out all the blood. Yeah. So that's pretty much the story of it.
Yeah, and that's 3 weeks is a long time for a Clive Barker play. It seemed like he was just ready to move on and do the next thing soon after starting.
So this is what it's called a Grand Guignol style play. The Grand Guignol was a denomination that comes from the small theater in Paris. In fact, it was the smallest theater in Paris. It was a theater located in the Pigalle area of Paris. This theater was a small chapel that was left from the destruction of this convent. And it had 2 large angels above the orchestra, and it was a neo-Gothic wood-paneled chapel, and it must have looked really interesting. The boxes had iron railings and looked like confessionals. And Grand Guignol, Guignol means it's a traditional Lyonnese puppet character, which was used in plays of political commentary like Punch and Judy. And even Punch and Judy could be pretty violent sometimes. I remember seeing it as a kid in school, some plays that were played with hand puppets. And usually those plays ended up with, like, there was either like a puppet of the devil, or there was some guy who was going to kill his wife, or there was some guy with a big stick. And then it usually end up with like a hand puppet, like beating another guy to death with a stick. And kids just laugh. It's
yeah.
But when you look at it, it's like, that's pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
Once I talked to Clive on Twitter back in, let me see if I can find that on my notes. May 28, 2009. So this was back in the day when Clive was still talking to the Twitter tree pretty frequently. And I sent him this, because I have this book from 1997, which is a reissue of Antonin Artaud's The Theater and Its Double. So this is what I wrote to Clive. Artaud's Theater of Cruelty sounds fascinating. Without an and I'm quoting from Artaud now, without an element of cruelty at the root of every spectacle, the theater is not possible. In our present state of degeneration, it is through the skin that metaphysics must be made to re-enter our minds. Those two lines are from Artaud, The Theater and Its Double. And then I asked Clive Barker, Frankenstein in Love could be said to follow Artaud's Theater of Cruelty concept? And this was Clive Barker's answer. Your observations about Frankenstein in Love are absolutely right. 3 decades since I wrote it, you're the first person to notice. I gotta say, this really made my day.
I gotta say, yeah, it must have been a great feeling.
Antonin Artaud was kind of a weird character. He had meningitis when he was a kid, and so that kind of always made him like a very nervous person. And also, in his older years, he spent 9 years in a mental institution.
Oh, wow.
He always thought that the theater should be less about words and more about impressions. He didn't even give that much value to dialogue. He was very influenced by Balinese theater.
What was it, like actions or speak louder than words, kind of,
Yeah, Artaud was convinced that, words were incapable of expressing certain feelings, and that these were better revealed through gestures or sounds, or, like screams and which there's a lot of those in this play, Frankenstein in Love. There's a lot of screaming in and off the stage. So yeah.
And that also, if Clive Barker sort of subscribed to that philosophy, that might explain why he experimented so much with pantomime theater.
Yeah.
This book, The Theater and Its Double, was published in 1938, and that's the book that contains the 2 manifestos of the Theater of Cruelty. Mm. In the production of the Theater of Cruelty plays, there were these mechanical devices used to create frenzy, like strident and dissonant sound effects, whirling stage sets, effects of storm by means of light, and unusual speech effects like screams. That's exactly, you can actually see how Clive was influenced by Artaud's Theater of Cruelty here. Yeah.
Very curious when they did this, how bloody it was, when they actually did this play, because red was definitely a big color.
Yeah.
It kept, popping up, and I mean, red is a symbolic thing. In a way, it is for death and life, in a way, isn't it? Red, the blood, can be looked at as life and death.
Blood is red, the devil is red. Whenever something is depicted as lustful, there's always a lot of red in there as well. So it's a color that causes a certain effect on us. It's a warm color. It's a color that excites us. Just another quick thing about the Theater of Cruelty was that this form of theater was supposed to launch an attack on the spectator's subconscious in an attempt to release deep-rooted fears and anxieties that are normally suppressed, forcing people to view themselves and their natures without the shield of civilization, which again kind of fits the form of this play. Civilization is crumbling. There's no government. There's no system. Like, people are dying in the streets. There's cholera going on. There's shots being fired, like Lazaro says. Bang, 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 bang every day, every night.
Yeah.
It's very gory. I mean, it opens up with a stage and a disembodied head.
Stuck on like a
pike.
A pike or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're always describing horrible atrocities that are happening outside. So it'd be like people are trying to dance on fire and they just burn themselves up, or
That's what happened to Cockatoo. He tried to walk on the fire.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and there was what was it that executing the original president's guard and
who's killing them? The new guard.
Yeah.
I think that is meant to be also claustrophobic because in his production notes, Clive said, though the stage instructions at the beginning of the play proposed a relatively open symbolic space decorated with hanging lights and carnival banners, I now think that may not be the best solution. Doubtless, it was the most financially feasible at the time of writing the play. He goes on to talk about that, but then he says, but with the benefit of hindsight, I wonder if a more confined and solid rendering of the palace and barrio might not serve the drama better. Yeah, because the whole claustrophobic sensation of this play forces us to remain within the grime, so to speak, within the bloody walls of, what's going on.
Yeah, and at one point they're even sealing themselves in, right?
At the end, yeah.
Yeah.
At the palace.
Yeah, Cockatoo is because of the plague, and this is from the Dark Fantastic. There's Douglas Winter mentions that it's also a throwback to that Edgar Allan Poe story,
Mask of the Red Death.
Mask of the Red Death, where the Duke is closing himself in his castle and letting the people outside deal with the plague. So in here it's Cockatoo, drugged, the puppet king of Dr. Joseph Frankenstein is also like closing himself, and it's very hot and oppressive.
Yeah.
What was a question or not a question, but El Coco had like a heroin addiction.
Yeah, it's mentioned a couple of times.
What was Clive Barker trying to say with that? I mean, I just took it as maybe on the nose, like maybe a part of him. It was still to make him feel alive in a way, because his body's dead. I mean, he can't get high from it, can he?
I think he does.
Oh, does he?
I think he does because it seems in here that after he does it, he gets in kind of a daze.
Okay.
So he doesn't have to deal with his warring body parts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
I was just thinking.
I think it's meant to, because at one point he does mention that his body parts don't match. He's different people at once.
Yeah.
He's in revolt, and his parts don't want to be together. Like one of his hands belonged to a blind old man who was a writer, and his other hand belonged to a gambler?
A gambler who killed his family.
Killed his family at 23, so...
Yeah.
It's interesting because El Coco is becoming the president, and his name is Cesar Guerrero. Caesar, of course, the conqueror, Caesar,
Yeah.
And Guerrero means warrior, so he's the warrior Caesar. That's another thing that immediately comes to mind when you see his name.
Well, and they're all made up names. In
the sense that his body parts are from different people, it's like he's representing the people, like he's almost like a Leviathan, but not a Leviathan of the state, like a Hobbesian Leviathan, but more like a Leviathan of the people. He's
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Patchy and stuff. Like one of his parts is darker than the other.
Yeah.
And his hands belong to different people. He's both young and old, and so in that sense, I thought that was very symbolic as well.
The colors of his skin were different too, right?
Yeah.
Like dark,
black,
red.
That's a good catch.
Mm-hmm.
Very good catch.
Did you get the part where I think it's either Cockatoo or El Coco? No, actually, I'm sorry, it's the dictator. He's saying that he's going to escape. This is right in the beginning, so he says that he's going to escape, and he even has a letter from the American president of Vice. And then someone says, "You mean the vice president?"
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. There's a nice jab at the Cold War, and
there were a lot of little jokes in here.
Yeah, it's very witty.
Yeah. I mean, for being as dark as it is.
Of course, yeah. I like the way that he mixes death and humor. The gallows, what's called as the gallows humor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talking about gallows humor, this guy, and you can read this in the book Clive Barker's A through Z of Horror. It says here that the Grand Guignol was opened on 13 April 1897 by Oscar Metenier. He was a very strange character. He was secretary to a police commissioner, and one of his duties was to accompany a condemned man to his death. He was not a literary man or a poet. He was a man of the flesh, suffering flesh that was going to die.
Huh.
So that was the guy who invented the Grand Guignol Theater. Unfortunately, the Grand Guignol Theater didn't last too long because, one, there was the war, and two, the Nazis kind of took it over. It says here, according to historian Agnes Pierron, it says the fact that the Grand Guignol was frequented by the Nazis contributed to its downfall. No doubt about it. It was part of the tourist trail at the end of the 1930s. The Nazis couldn't avoid coming across it. The Grand Guignol never recovered after the Second World War. It was supposed to show the worst kind of horror, but the war itself was that kind of horror.
Okay, so yeah, it's not cool anymore once the Nazis like it.
Yeah. And so the play Frankenstein in Love is discussed in the Revelations website, and I Googled around some dates from other private small theater companies that did productions of Frankenstein in Love. Because the funny thing is, to do that, they only have to give Clive Barker $1 for the rights to produce the play. And so there was a 1996 production directed by Russell Blackwood for San Francisco's Thrillpeddlers. And then 2001, there was another production by the rude Guerilla Theater, and I'm talking guerrilla warfare, not gorillas, of Santa Ana, California. The 2002 production by Sensurround Stagings in Atlanta, Georgia. There was another one the next year by Sacred Fools Theater Company from Los Angeles. 2004 saw a production done by the Vortex Theater in Albuquerque. Is that it? New Mexico, I think. There was a 2006 production in Kuala Lumpur directed by Gavin Yap. There was another one in 2008 by the CIC Theater in Chicago, and in the same year, the Mission Creek Players played it in Washington. And finally, the last one that I found, and I think there might have been a few more between 2011 and now, but there was the 2011 Monash Uni Student Theatre, directed by Emma Palackic and Sophie Phillips, in conjunction with the Melbourne Fringe Theater, or Festival 2011, and performed at the atmospheric Collingwood Underground Arts Park. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, it's really cool that at that time Clive made Forms of Heaven and Incarnations, I think just for the sole purpose of spreading out, spreading his plays and resurrecting them. I was wondering if there were ever any productions of Clive Barker's plays previous to 1995 when those two books were published. By other companies, not Clive Barker companies.
Yeah, I guess one way to find out would be maybe Google some sort of Clive Barker theater play reviews in old newspapers, because you can do that on Google Books. You can look for a certain number of publications.
Or Phil and Sarah's site probably already would know.
I wonder if there's I wonder if there's any plays of it that are in the process of being made too. You could look. I like to look that up and see.
Yeah. Right.
Productions of it.
Yeah. If I had ever been involved in drama at all, I would probably want to try to get a local production of some Clive Barker play put together in Fairbanks, but I don't have any experience in that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't either. I'd love to do that too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting the way that the Dog Company went through some phases, and they also had like a pantomime stage where they had plays where there was no dialogue. And it was still Clive Barker writing those, I think, like Dog or Day of the Dog or something like that. They basically just acted, but they didn't have any dialogue. They just pantomimed. And usually there were characters like Pulcinella and Harlequin. Those productions kind of reflect onto the Peter Atkins script of Bloodline. There's a scene that was never filmed for the movie where that friend of
the
Marchand,
surgeon. Augustus, or what? Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah, exactly, that guy. And his face gets turned into a drum because he comes across this set of clown Cenobites from Angelique when he's walking back home, and then they kind of like attract him with like festival stuff and pretend that they're going to set a play for him, and then all of a sudden the curtain opens and it's a giant mouth to hell.
Yeah,
and it kind of
that was really cool.
Wow.
It gets overtaken, but I'm getting sidetracked here. So the Dog Company went through those stages, and like I was saying, there were even plays that didn't have any dialogue that Clive Barker wrote.
Yeah.
Which one were those?
Dog and Day of the Dog. The first few plays that Dog Company performed, they kind of became the Dog Company because of their big hit with Dog, I think.
Well,
yeah, I would love to see a production of a Clive Barker play. It was neat that you got to see You got to see History of the Devil not too long ago.
Yeah, and it was done by the Nearly Naked Theater, which was interesting because they were actually naked on stage in a few parts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like for example, when it's the prehistoric part of History of the Devil, and people are just walking around with like a piece of cloth around their bodies, and they were naked. So, and then Satan Falls from the Sky. That actor was naked in the play when he fell from the sky, so he had the angel wings and stuff. Yeah. So I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I've never seen anything like that.
It was really tiny stage though, a really tiny auditorium, so that made it really intimate.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I think that when these books came out, my favorite play was this one, was Frankenstein in Love. But now reading them again, I don't really know if I could decide between this one and History of the Devil. They're both so smart. They're so clever. I mean,
yeah, those are the ones that stand out, I would say, along with Crazy Face. Crazy Face is also a very strong. Yeah.
Yeah, Crazy Face is also really good.
I need to read that. Something I need to do. That's what Simon Bamford wrote that, or didn't write it, but acted in it, right?
Oh, that's right. I think he played Crazy Face. Yeah.
Teal Eulenspiegel.
So did you want me to get into my my notes here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did y'all catch some of the Island of Dr Moreau nods in the story that Clive put in there? There's obviously a few things in there, like with those two monsters.
I have to admit, I've not seen either version of that movie.
What, the Island of Dr Moreau?
Yeah.
I think Bela Lugosi is in the first adaptation. He plays like
that was the Island of Lost Souls.
Yeah. Oh, Island of Lost Souls, right? Which is kind of an adaptation of the Island of Dr Moreau. I remember Moreau used to take his creatures to the House of Pain, where he would work on animals and turn them into like humans. But here it's the other way around. Joseph Frankenstein, he grabs humans and corpses and turns them into monsters.
Yeah.
So it's a reverse thing that he does.
I think it was cool how Frankenstein had that betrayal. He felt betrayed by his own creation. Instead of the monster. Yeah. Feeling really betrayed.
Everybody in this play has a really twisted sense of morality, but I think Frankenstein the most. I think he's the least sympathetic character in this whole play.
You really want him to get his, just desserts.
Oh, yeah. Especially by the end when he's trying to force that wedding on Veronique.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Frankenstein is interesting because he actually believes in what he's doing, I think.
Yeah.
When he says something like he wants what holds humanity back is like it's fear. And so he wanted to create we're afraid because we're afraid of death. And he wanted to create a race of humans who would not be afraid anymore because they would be immortal. So that's basically Veronique was going to be the mother of this new race that he wanted to start.
So anything that he did, any experiments that he did, any horrible tortures that he, did to people were all justified because of this end goal that he had.
Yeah, the same as when he created Cesar Guerrero, El Coco. Like he says that when I created you, what was me went into you. So it's like now I'm just a husk. He says something like to give the spark of life to his creation, it's like the creator himself has to diminish himself a little bit. In that sense, it's like now Coco is his legacy. So.
Well, and now it's almost like he lives in the world that he's trying to create because he has no respect for life.
Murder is just a word to him, isn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't he say that?
Yeah, and it seems like he has no respect for life or death.
Which is another reverse of on the original tale, because Frankenstein in the other one, he was kind of sympathetic. He wanted to create life and see that people lived. It was cool how Clive just flipped the conventions of the story. Yeah,
the Frankenstein story. Like in the Mary Shelley version, the monster, the creature is the monstrous one, but we kind of empathize with him. But at the same time, he does these horrible things. Frankenstein really played God, but I kind of always felt a little partial to Frankenstein. Yeah, because like
I don't think he meant it. He doesn't mean for it to,
Exactly. He just regrets his decision when he sees a creature open his eyes. It's like, oh my God, I created this horrible creature made of dead people parts, and it's like. Now it's, what am I to it? I'm the creator. Instead of being a god creating a perfect human race, I just created a monster. So what does that say about me? So he just rejects his creation. And the poor Frankenstein, goes out looking for love, but also revenge, because he ends up killing members of Frankenstein's family. He kills his own bride, Frankenstein's bride, before they get married and everything, just to get back at his creator. In this one, Cesar Guerrero, the creation, is actually looking for his father in the play. He actually wants to be face to face with him.
Yeah.
And
when he kills him.
When he kills him, exactly. Yeah.
And going back to what you were saying about the original Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and him feeling remorse when the monster opens his eyes, kind of reminds me now that you mentioned it, just made me think of. I think it was an interview with Clive Barker where he was talking about Hellraiser and putting the movie together. And when he first saw all the Cenobites standing there, he just had this moment of regret and just like, oh my God, what have I done? Like people aren't going to get this. This is really weird, or people are going to laugh at this. This is crazy. But obviously it all worked out. Yeah, he did take a chance.
It took a chance, but it really worked because the work was there. The work was sound. I mean,
well,
it was amazing.
I could see where he's coming from though, because if you think about these, there's sort of these like heavy metal, leather bondage demons.
Yeah.
In writing, it doesn't. It sounds hokey.
Yeah. Yeah, like a guy with pins in his face. Oh, what do? I just punch him and the pins go inside. So. Yeah. But it's that movie so totally works. But anyway, it just made me think of that idea of like, what have I done?
Like a creator having like doubts about his creation.
Yeah. It's like he's released this monster into the world, and he does. It's like he had hoped it would be successful, but now he doesn't know.
And it became pretty huge, I mean, there were like billboards in Tokyo when Hellraiser 2 came out. They were like, I don't know, 8 feet tall or whatever, or 10 feet tall. So
even going a little bit more on what you're saying about that, Ryan, Clive Barker eventually did get a little tired of pinheading away.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Regretted it.
Yeah. You're right. Taking that even further, it turned into a runaway monster, didn't it?
Yeah, and he never really cared for that.
No. Yeah. No, I mean, I think after number 4, when they didn't even bother asking him, about asking him if they could make movies or getting his input anymore, it's just that the movies just became horrible.
Yeah.
And then he just wrote a novel just to kill Pinhead.
Yeah,
20-something years later.
That's weird. That's weird. That's kind of you brought up a good point about how the creation of something you put out in the world, the creator, just can, feel differently in different times of his life, and finally killing it.
Yeah. I mean, when it starts getting a life of its own, I guess, But that moment of doubt that Clive Barker had watching the Cenobites on the big screen, I mean, that can be explained by he pushes the envelope. He pushes boundaries. So every performer or artist who writes boundary expanding work has to take a chance at some point, so there's always a risk involved.
Well, and he was the writer and the director, and it was like, it was all on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you just have to push forward because, things that he couldn't get away with Hellraiser 1, look at Hellraiser 8 or 9 or 6 or 7. Those have much more horrible things in there a few years later that completely acceptable at that point. So, yeah, I mean, imagine like a remake now if Clive Barker actually had full creative potential, power, without anything, any kind of influence coming from the Weinsteins.
That's a tall order.
Imagine what he could do, because I think the new Clive is kind of really rough and a little more punchy when it comes to like violence and stuff. He's not as poetic anymore in a way. He's more like things
right to the gut.
Right to the gut, yeah.
That's what he said about Scarlet Gospels.
There's a huge contrast here between the Scarlet Gospels and Abarat, or between Mr. Begone and Abarat. So I think he can get back to the poetic writing again.
Sure.
Yeah. Somebody had said to me in a private message on Facebook that they thought the quality was waning or something of his writing, and it's just because I think it's going back to this idea that people have this expectation of this is what this book is supposed to be like, or they've already kind of written it in their heads.
I guess they were just because for years they have seen nothing from Clive but Abarat, and so I guess some people were starting to think like, this is too simple for me. I want something more elaborate. If he's just gonna do this kind of writing now, I'm just not gonna be that much into it.
I think for Abarat, you'll be surprised that each book I think is about twice as complex as the one before it. So
no, that's true.
Yeah.
I did get into the third one a little bit before I gave up, but I noticed that it's much more extensive, much more, it's a huge volume.
And I think this pretense of withholding the violence for the sake of the adolescent readers or whatever, or the juvenile readers, that sort of drops away by the third book.
I guess that was also true for Harry Potter, because the first books are very childlike. Not childlike, but more. Yeah. Well, less intimidating, and then
it was 10-year-olds. The characters were 10-year-olds.
So eventually, the crowd
people
that
grew up with as the characters got old in their book. The people that were reading them got older too.
Yeah. Well, she could write a book each year. And Clive isn't quite able to do it that way.
So she could get away with making them darker because the generation of readers that was reading the Potter books was growing up as well.
Yeah, and I think that he had that. I mean, I think I read that in an interview that he had that in mind to do that same kind of thing, to have readers kind of grow up with the Abarat books. But they're not coming out as fast as Harry Potter books, obviously. But
I felt like the first volume started out kind of like A Thief of Always, and now the next one, Kree Rising, I'm starting to feel like it's going to be really complex and plot lines within plot lines and characters. So look at the size of the books that have been growing, like one, then Days of Magic, Nights of War, Absolute Midnight, and who knows what 4 and 5 are going to be like.
Well, and there's this hint of creatures coming through a veil, between from another dimension. And which happens in a lot of Clive Barker books, right? You've got the Oviates in Magica and the Iad Ouroboros in the books of the Art
Show and in Everville.
Yeah. And was there something in, maybe not in Weave World, I can't remember. Maybe the Surgeons, I guess.
Yeah, and in Abarat there's also a few pyramids full of giant bug creatures that eat everything.
Yeah, well,
that is supposed to show up at some point, right?
Yeah, those creatures are what turn the sky black.
Sackbrood.
Yeah, they create the Absolute Midnight.
Oh, okay. That chapter was really creepy on Days of Magic Nights.
Yeah, and that poor, what was his name, the bug guy, or they made him open the pyramids.
Yeah, that's a weird character with bugs crawling across his face.
So I think the last thing you were talking about, Rob, was
the religion aspect. How I felt Cardinal Amatano, how he represented religion as a cold and empty void of feeling. Mm-hmm. How religion only loves death and finds comfort in agony it causes life. But when he gets threatened by those two monsters, when they're going to eat him, he's like, "Please don't kill me." So I think it kind of is like a symbolic thing, showing that religion, how hypocritical it is. He's mean. He's a mean guy. I mean, he talks about how he
hates life.
Well, he comes off at first like he's this innocent, kind of person. Like he didn't do nothing wrong. But then finally he admits, I liked watching him cut these people up. He did it he even said Frankenstein did it out of love. I watched him do it out of loathing.
Yeah.
And he stuck his fingers into somebody's brain just to feel their life go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like the Decker character in Nightbreed.
Yeah.
He hates everything that's alive, so he wants to destroy it. And
But they explain to him why they're going to eat him, and he's like, "Okay, you can eat me." So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and these kind of religious, especially Catholic people, seem to, in a lot of Clive's work, there seems to be these sort of non-spiritual people that sort of worm their way into the high positions in the Catholic Church just to have this comfy life and for the power.
I think it's in Imagica that there's this part where he depicts like religious orders giving food to the poor. They just like stick them to like these effigies of saints and put them out, and so the crowd outside is like grabbing stuff from it. And yeah, like religious people in Clive's work are never very sympathetic characters, I think. But it's perfect that he chose to depict this promiscuity between the clergy and politics, because that was true for a lot of regimes with dictators. They're always very close to the clergy. Like there's always a cardinal that blesses monuments or is present in all the official speeches that the dictator is saying, and the power just rubs hands with the clergy very often in dictatorships because dogma is tyranny. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. The last thing I had to say was I think the best line of the whole play, which pretty much summed it up for me, was by the tailor Bazoofi. And it was he says, yeah, he made him the new suit, and he says, "Life is a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to stay here." Yeah.
Yeah, and we should add, for people who haven't read this play, that suit is made out of human skin, and it's not, and they started out in a mortuary, and it's not like they didn't just use dead people's skin. They had to go find nice, healthy skin from living people.
Yeah, because you wanted something nice and fresh.
Yeah. Yeah, so that takes away a little bit of the sympathy for the monster character, the El Coco.
He still loves life. I got the impression that he still loved life in a way.
Yeah.
He just comes back because he was listening to
It was a love story between him and Veronique.
Right? Yeah.
Veronique. Maybe it was a love story that brought that out.
Sure, that too.
And him.
But what I was saying is he only comes back from death after they kill him and skin him, because he was laying under a shroud, and he knew that the doctor that talks to Bazoofi, that Bazoofi was trying to get clothes from the corpses to make clothes of his own. He could feel the doctor violating the corpses, taking their riches, and even having his way with some of them, because you kind of get the idea that the doctor is a necrophile. Necrophiliac, yeah. And then he comes back more through his own will, but to exact vengeance in a way, I think.
Yeah.
Except, of course, his revenge doesn't work the way he expected, because it's like the RoboCop for Prime Directive.
Yeah,
exactly. You can't arrest the CEO of the company, and in this case, it's like you can't put your hands on your creator in rage, otherwise you'll bleed.
Yes, right, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but the line was, "Your flesh opens like a flower if it is laid on me in anger," which, of course, I think later became there's a whole story about that concept in How Spoilers Bleed in Books of Blood, Volume 6.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
One of the better stories.
Yeah, well, man, that one kind of creeped me out when I read it the first time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so just kind of shift gears here. What we've got coming up. Every year, of course, we've done a fundraiser, and we try something different every year, just, to switch it up, and we want to make sure that it's fun for our listeners and people to participate, and that there's something, that you get something out of it besides just supporting us. So this year, it's going to be a Kickstarter. And we're still working on what, all the prizes are, but we know they're going to be good. We're getting help again from Clive Barker / Seraphim Films and Century Guild. So you can look forward to that. And
there's going to be stretch goals.
Yeah, well, our initial goal is small, and the bulk of it is going to be stretch goals, and we're going to do some fun things. Add some fun concepts for the audio and stuff for our listeners with the stretch goals. So yeah, we're still sort of finalizing everything, but we should have that up here in the next week or two.
We'll keep you updated with that stuff in the news episodes and on our Facebook page and our blogs and the BarkerCast YouTube channel. So yeah, we'll show you what we can do, and we'll tell you what we have in store for 2016, and ask for your support, continued support in this.
All right. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This podcast and site are a labor of love by the fans for the fans. News, features, and show notes for this episode can be found at www.clivebarkercast.com. Go to iTunes and please leave us a review. Reviews really help us get the word out about Clive Barker. You can also find us on Podomatic, Xbox Music Store, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Double Twist, BlackBerry, and Pocket Cast. We have a Facebook page, so come on and like our Facebook page and join the Occupy Midian group for lots of discussion about Nightbreed and other Clive Barker stuff. On Twitter, we're at BarkerCast and at Occupy Midian. Opening theme by Mark Buckle.